Self-awareness has a reputation problem. We tend to picture it as a kind of clarity, someone who always knows what they feel, who has their inner life neatly organized and fully understood, who moves through the world with the calm certainty of a person who has figured themselves out. That image is wrong, or at least incomplete, because the people who are genuinely, deeply self-aware, who have spent real time in the uncomfortable project of looking at themselves honestly, don't tend to feel clear. They tend to feel complicated. They notice things about themselves that they haven't resolved. They catch reactions that they can't fully explain. They hold questions about their own motivations that don't have clean answers. Self-awareness is not knowing yourself perfectly. It is the willingness to keep looking at yourself honestly, including the parts that don't match the version of you that you would prefer to be. Today, we're looking at 10 common habits that are genuine signs of high self-awareness. Habits that are easy to dismiss as overthinking or insecurity, or simply paying too much attention to things that don't matter. They matter. And the fact that you notice them at all is itself the point. Habit 1. You notice your own patterns. Even the ones you haven't changed yet. You do the thing again, the thing you told yourself you wouldn't do, the familiar reaction, the predictable avoidance, the same response to the same kind of situation. And the difference between you and someone who doesn't have this quality is not that you don't have the pattern, it's that you can see it. You can watch yourself do the thing and know, in real time, that you are doing the thing. You might not be able to stop it yet, but the watching, the noticing, is present. And the gap between seeing a pattern and being run by a pattern without seeing it is enormous. Psychologist Tasha Eurich, whose research on self-awareness is among the most comprehensive in the field, found that only about 10 to 15% of people are genuinely self-aware, despite the fact that most people believe they are. The difference consistently is not the absence of unhelpful patterns. It is the willingness to see them clearly, even when, especially when, the clarity is uncomfortable. Noticing the pattern is not failing to change it. Noticing the pattern is the prerequisite for ever changing it at all. Habit 2. You can tell the difference between what you feel and what you think you should feel. Something happens, good news, a loss, a social interaction, and there is the feeling that arrives. And then almost simultaneously, there is the assessment, is this the right feeling? Is this what I should be feeling right now? Most people collapse these two into one. They feel what they think they should feel, and they never notice the gap. The promotion arrives and they perform excitement because that's what promotion feelings are supposed to look like. The relationship ends and they perform grief on the expected schedule. The self-aware person feels the gap. They notice that the promotion produced anxiety rather than excitement, that the breakup produced relief before it produced sadness, that the feeling and the expected feeling are not the same thing, and that the real one is messier, less socially convenient, and far more honest. This is not emotional confusion. It is the opposite. It is emotional clarity precise enough to distinguish between what is actually happening inside you and what the situation says should be happening. That precision is rare, and it is one of the foundations of genuine self-knowledge. Habit 3. You catch yourself mid-reaction and adjust. The sharp response was on its way out. The defensive tone was already forming. The old pattern was activating. And then somewhere between the impulse and the expression, something caught it. Not perfectly, not gracefully, sometimes just barely. A slight redirect, a softened word, a pause that buys enough time for the response to change shape before it lands. This habit looks like nothing from the outside. No one notices the correction because the original reaction was never completed. But the person who made the adjustment knows exactly what almost came out. And they know it because they were watching themselves closely enough to intervene in their own process. This is one of the most practically valuable things self-awareness produces. the ability to catch your own reactions before they fully deploy. Not suppression, the reaction is felt completely. But a real-time awareness that creates a gap between stimulus and response wide enough to choose what happens next. Viktor Frankl wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose. The people who have developed this habit live in that space. They found it not through theory, but through the accumulated practice of watching themselves closely enough that the catching becomes possible. Habit 4. You know what drains you, and you've stopped pretending it doesn't. There was a period, maybe a long one, when you pretended certain things didn't cost you what they did. The social obligations you attended with a smile and left depleted. The relationships you maintained because you should, not because they nourished you. The commitments you honored because saying no felt like a failure of character rather than an act of honest self-knowledge. And at some point, you stopped pretending. Not overnight, more like a gradual shift toward honest accounting, acknowledging, at least to yourself, that certain things drain you, that your energy is not unlimited, that knowing your limits is not the same thing as being limited. This kind of self-knowledge tends to be mistaken for selfishness by people who haven't done the work of building it. It looks like being picky, like not being a team player, like withdrawing from things a good person would tolerate. What it actually is, the hard-earned refusal to perform a capacity you don't have. The honesty to say, at least internally, this costs me more than it gives. And the maturity to act on that knowledge rather than continue performing a version of yourself that looks generous but is actually just depleted. Habit 5. You can hold criticism without immediately defending or immediately collapsing. Someone points out something about you that is uncomfortable to hear, and the two most common responses are both available: defend, explain why they're wrong, why the context was different, why that's not really what happened, or collapse, absorb it completely, internalize it as evidence of fundamental failure, spiral. You do something rarer, you hold it. Not agree with it automatically, not dismiss it automatically. Just receive it. Let it sit without immediately needing to do something with it. Consider whether it contains something useful, something accurate, something worth integrating, while also maintaining the basic architecture of your own self-worth. This is extraordinarily difficult. It requires two simultaneous capacities: the openness to consider that you might genuinely need to change something, and the stability to not let that consideration become a threat to your entire sense of self. The person who can do this, even imperfectly, even occasionally, has built something that most people never achieve: an identity that is secure enough to receive feedback without either weaponizing it against themselves or defending against it reflexively. Habit 6. You recognize when you're projecting. Someone does something that bothers you, and instead of simply being bothered, which is the default for most people, a second process runs quieter and more honest. Wait, is this about them? Or is this about me? Projection, attributing your own unacknowledged feelings, fears, or traits to another person, is one of the most universal psychological phenomena and one of the hardest to catch in yourself. It requires a specific kind of double vision, seeing your reaction to someone else and simultaneously recognizing that the reaction might be originating in you rather than in them. The boss who seems controlling might remind you of a parent. The friend whose success bothers you might be touching an insecurity you haven't fully acknowledged. The person who seems too much might be showing you a part of yourself you've been managing. Noticing this in the moment, not in therapy 3 weeks later, but in real time as it's happening, is one of the clearest signs that a person has developed genuine psychological self-awareness. It doesn't make the feeling go away, but it relocates its source, and that relocation changes everything. Habit 7. You say, "I don't know," more than most people are comfortable with. Someone asks you why you reacted the way you did, or what you want, or how you feel about something that just happened. And instead of generating a plausible answer from the available material, which is what most people do, you say, "I don't know yet." This sounds simple. It isn't. Most social environments punish uncertainty. They reward the person who has an answer, a position, a clear narrative about themselves and their motivations. Saying "I don't know" about your own inner life, genuinely, not as deflection, goes against the social expectation that you should be the world's foremost expert on yourself. But the self-aware person has learned something that the confident-sounding person often hasn't. That the honest answer to many questions about your own motivations, feelings, and patterns is, "I'm not sure yet." And that a premature answer, one generated for social convenience rather than genuine understanding, is often less useful than the discomfort of staying with the not knowing. The willingness to not know about yourself in public without rushing to fill the gap, that is a form of intellectual and emotional courage that looks nothing like courage from the outside. Habit 8. You've noticed the difference between who you are and who you perform. Everyone performs to some degree. Social life requires a certain amount of presentation management, choosing which parts of yourself to lead with, adjusting your energy to the context, being the version of you that fits the situation. The difference with self-awareness is not that the performance stops. It's that you can see it happening. You notice when you're being slightly funnier than you feel, when you're nodding along to something you privately disagree with, when you're performing competence in a meeting while internally uncertain, when the social version of you is running on autopilot while the actual version is somewhere slightly behind it, watching. This noticing can feel like a curse, the self-conscious quality of never quite being fully inside any role you play. But it is also one of the most important skills a human being can develop. The ability to distinguish between your social presentation and your internal reality. Because without that distinction, the performance gradually replaces the person, and you stop being able to tell which one is you. If you can see the gap, if you can stand in the space between the performed self and the real one, you are doing something that most people never learn to do. Habit 9. You know your triggers, and you know they're yours. Something happens, small, objectively manageable, and the reaction inside you is bigger than the event warrants. The tone someone used, the way a situation unfolded, the specific look on someone's face that sent your nervous system somewhere older and more loaded than the present moment required. And you know this. You know, even while the reaction is running, that it belongs to something earlier, something deeper, something this person or this situation simply activated rather than caused. This is one of the most mature things a person can do with their own psychology. Take ownership of their reactions, not in the self-blaming sense, not "it's all my fault," but in the accurate sense. This reaction is mine. It was triggered by something external, but it lives in me. And the size of it is about my history, not about this moment. Most people spend their entire lives attributing the size of their reactions to the external cause. The self-aware person has learned to notice when the reaction is bigger than the stimulus, and to ask, what is this actually about? That question, asked honestly and repeatedly over time, is one of the most powerful tools for psychological growth that exists. And the fact that you ask it, even when you don't always have the answer, is itself the sign. Habit 10. You're uncomfortable with the version of you that other people have decided you are. People have decided who you are. Your family has a version, your friends have one, your colleagues have another. Each one is built from the parts of you they've been shown, filtered through their own needs and projections, and solidified into something that feels to them like a complete picture. And you're uncomfortable with all of them. Not because they're cruel or unfair. They're often warm, even flattering. But because you can feel the edges of each version where it stops matching who you actually are. Where it gets you slightly wrong, where it captures the performance but misses the person. This discomfort is, paradoxically, a very good sign. It means you have a relationship with yourself that is more nuanced than other people's summary of you. It means you haven't collapsed into being the person others expect. It means there is a part of you, the actual you, the one you are when no one is watching, that resists being fully captured by anyone else's description. The discomfort of being defined is the discomfort of someone who is still becoming, and still becoming is always better than having been decided. 10 habits, none of them comfortable, none of them producing the kind of clear, settled self-knowledge that self-awareness is supposed to look like. And that is exactly the point. Self-awareness is not a destination where you arrive at complete self-understanding and get to stop looking. It is a practice, an ongoing, imperfect, sometimes uncomfortable practice of paying attention to what's actually happening inside you, rather than what you wish was happening or what would be more convenient to feel. The people who are genuinely self-aware are not the ones who have figured themselves out. They are the ones who have accepted that figuring themselves out is ongoing work, and who keep showing up for that work even when it's hard, even when it's unflattering, even when the honest answer is, I don't know yet. If you recognized yourself in several of these habits, if you have the tendency to watch yourself, to question your own motives, to notice the gap between what you feel and what you perform, you have something that most people spend their entire lives without developing. It doesn't always feel like a gift. Sometimes it feels like a burden. The burden of seeing things you can't unsee, of knowing things about yourself you'd rather not know. But it is a gift. Because the alternative, moving through life without ever clearly seeing the person who is doing the moving, is a kind of blindness that protects you from discomfort and costs you everything else. Keep looking, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. Take care of yourself. We'll see you in the next one.